I never thought my marriage would end because of a kitchen renovation. But here I am, 6 months later, sitting in my new apartment, finally understanding that sometimes the person you think you know best is actually a complete stranger. It all started when my mother-in-law Patricia decided she didn't like me. From the moment David introduced me to his family 3 years ago, she made it crystal clear that I wasn't good enough for her precious son. I was a public school teacher from a middle-class family in Ohio. David was a successful architect whose family owned half the commercial real estate in downtown Seattle. According to Patricia, I was obviously a gold digger who trapped her son with my small-town charm. The first red flag should have been at our engagement party. Patricia stood up to give a toast and said, quote, "I hope Sarah realizes how lucky she is to marry into a family with such high standards. I'm sure she'll learn to fit in eventually." David just laughed it off and told me later that his mom was just protective. I believed him because I loved him and I wanted to see the best in his family. Our wedding was a nightmare. Patricia insisted on planning everything because, as she put it, Sarah's family probably doesn't understand how these things are done properly. She chose the venue, the flowers, the menu, even my dress. When I tried to suggest alternatives, she'd smile sweetly and say, "Oh honey, trust me on this. I know what's appropriate." David kept telling me to pick my battles and that it was just one day. The dress she picked was 2 sizes too big, and made me look like I was playing dress up in my grandmother's closet. When I asked if we could get it altered, she said it was too late and that I should have spoken up sooner. I spent my wedding day feeling uncomfortable and self-conscious, constantly pulling at fabric and trying not to trip. After we got married, Patricia's criticism became a daily occurrence. She'd call David every morning to check in, and somehow the conversation always turned to me. She'd ask if I was keeping the house clean enough, if I was cooking proper meals, if I was managing our finances responsibly. David would hang up and relay her concerns to me like they were reasonable questions instead of passive-aggressive attacks. When I got promoted to department head at my school, Patricia's response was, "Well, I suppose that's nice for a little job like that." When David and I bought our first house, she said, "I hope Sarah appreciates what David's family connections made possible." When I suggested we host Thanksgiving at our place, she laughed and said, "Oh sweetie, you're not ready for that kind of responsibility yet." The breaking point came last spring when David and I decided to renovate our kitchen. We'd been saving for 2 years, and I was so excited to finally have a space where I could cook the way I wanted to. I spent weeks researching designs, getting quotes from contractors, picking out appliances. David seemed just as excited as I was. Then Patricia found out about our plans. She called David immediately and told him she was disappointed that he was making such a major decision without consulting the family. She said she had connections with the best contractors in the city, and that we were obviously going to make expensive mistakes without her guidance. David assured her that we had everything under control, but I could see he was already wavering. The next day, Patricia showed up at our house unannounced with her contractor friend, a man named Rick who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She walked through our kitchen, shaking her head and making disapproving noises. She told Rick that we clearly didn't understand the scope of what we were trying to do, and that he needed to take charge of the project. I tried to explain that we already had a contractor lined up, and that we'd done our research, but Patricia cut me off. "Sarah, honey, I know you mean well, but this is a significant investment. David's family has experience with these kinds of projects. You should be grateful for the help." David stood there saying nothing while his mother completely dismissed everything I'd worked on for months. When I looked at him expectantly, he just shrugged and said, "Mom does know a lot about construction. Maybe we should listen to her advice." That's when I realized that 3 years of marriage hadn't changed anything. David still saw me the way his mother did, as someone who needed guidance and couldn't be trusted to make important decisions. I wasn't his equal partner. I was his project, someone who needed to be managed and improved. I told Patricia politely but firmly that we appreciated her concern, but we were going to stick with our original plans. She smiled that fake smile she always gave me and said, "Of course, dear. I'm sure you know what you're doing." But she didn't give up. Over the next few weeks, she called David constantly. She sent him articles about kitchen renovation disasters. She had Rick call with a quote that was suspiciously lower than what our contractor had proposed. She even suggested that maybe we should wait a few more years until we were more financially stable. David started questioning everything. Were we sure about the layout? Did we really need such expensive appliances? Maybe his mom was right and we were getting in over our heads. Every conversation became an argument about whether we could trust our own judgment, or whether we needed his family's approval for every major decision. The final straw came when I discovered that David had been meeting with Rick behind my back. He'd given him our house key and told him to come by and take measurements while I was at work. When I came home and found a stranger in my kitchen, going through our cabinets and making notes, I was furious. David tried to explain that he was just getting a second opinion, but I knew what was really happening. He was letting his mother override my decisions in my own home. He was treating me like a child who couldn't be trusted with adult responsibilities. That night, I asked David a simple question. Do you see me as your equal partner in this marriage? Or do you see me as someone who needs your family's permission to make decisions about our life together? He couldn't answer. He said I was being dramatic and that his family just wanted to help. He said I was too sensitive about his mother's comments and that I should appreciate having people who cared about our success. But I wasn't being dramatic. I was finally seeing clearly. David had never stood up for me, not once in 3 years. Every time his mother criticized me, he found a way to justify it or minimize it. Every time I tried to assert myself, he told me I was overreacting. He'd married me, but he'd never actually chosen me over his family's opinion of who I should be. I realized that our kitchen renovation had become a symbol of everything wrong with our marriage. It wasn't about cabinets and countertops. It was about respect and partnership, and whether David saw me as capable of making important decisions about our shared life. I made my decision that night. I told David that I was moving out temporarily while I figured out what I wanted. He was shocked. He said I was throwing away our marriage over a stupid kitchen renovation. He said his mother was just trying to help, and that I was being unreasonable. But it wasn't about the kitchen, and it wasn't about his mother. It was about him. It was about the fact that after 3 years of marriage, he still didn't see me as his equal. He still thought his family's opinion mattered more than mine. He still believed that I needed to be managed and guided instead of respected and trusted. I moved into a small apartment across town and started seeing a therapist. I needed to understand how I'd allowed myself to accept so little respect for so long. I needed to figure out why I'd spent 3 years trying to win approval from people who were never going to give it to me. David called constantly at first. He said he missed me and that we could work things out. He said he'd tell his mother to back off, and that we could renovate the kitchen however I wanted. But when I asked him why it had taken me leaving for him to offer those compromises, he couldn't answer. The truth was that David liked having his mother involved in our decisions, because it meant he didn't have to take full responsibility for our marriage. If something went wrong, he could always blame her interference. If I was unhappy, he could say he was caught in the middle. He'd never had to choose between us because I'd always been the one to compromise. 3 months after I moved out, David filed for divorce. He said I'd abandoned our marriage, and that he couldn't be with someone who didn't respect his family. His lawyer tried to argue that I'd left without cause, and that I shouldn't be entitled to half our assets. That's when I discovered something interesting. The house we'd bought together was actually purchased with money from David's trust fund, but the deed was in both our names. The kitchen renovation we'd been planning was going to be paid for with my savings account, the one I'd been contributing to for 2 years, while David spent his salary on his hobbies and his expensive car. I hired my own lawyer, a woman named Jennifer who specialized in divorce cases involving family money. She looked at our financial records and smiled. She said Patricia and David had made a classic mistake. They'd assumed I was too naive to understand how marital property worked, and they'd structured our finances in a way that actually protected my interests. When we got to court, David's lawyer argued that I'd contributed nothing significant to our marriage and that I'd left without trying to work things out. Jennifer presented evidence of every financial contribution I'd made, every household expense I'd covered, every time I'd compromised my own goals to support David's career. She also presented evidence of Patricia's interference in our marriage. Text messages where David discussed our private conversations with his mother. Email threads where Patricia gave David advice on how to handle me. Phone records showing that David talked to his mother more than he talked to me. The judge was not impressed. She said it was clear that David had never established appropriate boundaries with his family, and that I'd been treated as a junior partner in my own marriage. She awarded me half of everything, including the house. David was furious. He said I'd manipulated the system and that I'd never deserved any of his family's money. Patricia called me directly for the first time since I'd moved out. She said I was a vindictive gold digger who destroyed her son's life out of spite. But I wasn't vindictive. I was just finally standing up for myself. I was finally demanding the respect I should have been given from the beginning. I was finally refusing to accept being treated like a second-class citizen in my own marriage. I sold the house and used my half of the proceeds to buy a small condo near my school. I kept teaching, got promoted again, and started taking graduate classes in educational administration. I began dating someone new, a fellow teacher named Michael, who treats me like an equal partner, and who's never once suggested that I need anyone's permission to make decisions about my own life. David remarried last year. His new wife is from a wealthy family that Patricia approves of. From what I hear through mutual friends, Patricia is very involved in their marriage too. She helps plan their vacations, gives advice on their decorating choices, and has strong opinions about when they should start having children. I feel sorry for David's new wife sometimes. I wonder if she knows what she's signed up for, or if she thinks she can change the dynamic. I wonder if she'll spend years trying to win Patricia's approval before she realizes that some people will never see you as good enough no matter what you do. But mostly, I don't think about them at all. I'm too busy living my own life, making my own decisions, and enjoying the peace that comes from being respected and valued for who I am. The kitchen renovation that started everything never happened. The new owners of our old house gutted the whole space and put in something completely different. Sometimes I drive by and look at the windows, remembering how excited I was about the plans I'd made and how crushed I felt when those plans were dismissed. But I'm glad it happened the way it did. That kitchen renovation taught me something important about myself and about what I deserve in a relationship. It taught me that love without respect isn't really love at all. It taught me that compromise only works when both people are willing to do it. Most importantly, it taught me that sometimes the person you think you married isn't the person you actually married. Sometimes it takes a crisis to reveal who someone really is underneath all the promises and good intentions. Sometimes you have to lose everything to realize that what you thought you had was never really yours to begin with. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though it was painful to learn. I'm grateful that I found the strength to walk away from a situation that was never going to get better. I'm grateful that I stopped trying to be someone else's version of who I should be and started being myself instead. And I'm especially grateful that I learned all of this before we had children together. I can't imagine trying to co-parent with someone who doesn't respect me as an equal, or watching Patricia undermine my parenting decisions the way she undermined everything else about my life. Now when I think about getting married again someday, I know exactly what questions to ask and what red flags to watch for. I know that a partner's relationship with their family tells you everything you need to know about how they'll treat you when things get difficult. I know that someone who won't stand up for you before you're married definitely won't stand up for you after. I learned that marriage isn't just about loving someone. It's about choosing them every day, especially when other people try to convince you that you've made the wrong choice. It's about building a life together that belongs to both of you, not to your families or your friends or anyone else who thinks they know what's best for you. David never learned how to choose me over his mother's opinions. He never learned how to see me as capable and intelligent and worthy of respect. He never learned that marriage means creating something new together, not just adding someone to your existing family dynamic. That kitchen renovation was supposed to be the beginning of making our house feel like our home. Instead, it became the end of a marriage that was never really ours to begin with. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who sees me as a problem to be managed instead of a partner to be cherished.